Alright, what's good everyone? Welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be doing a camera comparison between the Z Fold 6 and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So just so you know, the Z Fold 6 is always going to be on the right side and the iPhone 16 Pro Max is going to be on the left side for the whole video, so you don't have to guess which one is which. I'm going to be going through different focal lengths, different zooms, 1x to 10x to 25, 30, and also some tests in different lighting situations. So make sure you watch the whole video so you can see the full comparison between these two phones and all their cameras and what they're capable of. So let's get into the video. All right, so to start things off, we have a picture of my daughter, and right off the bat, you can see that the iPhone is more contrasty. It definitely looks like a higher detailed image, and then it also has more bokeh in the background, so you can see the background is a little bit more blurred out. This is just the 1x, and then going to the next photo, we got more pictures of my daughter, and against the same stuff. I feel like both phones produce good images in the scenario, and I don't think either one is trash or way worse than the other. I feel like it comes down to a stylistic preference. Okay, now we got some photos of birds, and this is the 1x main camera. In my opinion, the Z Fold 6 actually looks a little bit more sharp when it comes to the bird in the middle, but then the ground looks more detailed on the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And then this is 3x zoom. It's going to be optical for the Z Fold 6. Optical basically means that this is the zoom length. It's not digitally cropping in the image and, artificially zooming in. It actually is zoomed in at this length. So this is 3x optical, and the Z Fold 6, I feel like it has the potential to be sharper than the iPhone here, but then the way that it's processed, it kind of smoothed out the whole surface of the ground and it just has a weird glowy effect. But the bird, if you look at it, the neck of the bird and the eye, it definitely captured it more sharply. The iPhone missed the blackbird with the motion, and even the background of the iPhone's photo is kind of blurry, whereas the Z Fold 6 kind of has that sharp. I think the Z Fold 6 had the potential to be better overall, but it kind of has this weird processing going on. And then as we get to 5x, so this is optical for the iPhone and then digital for the Z Fold 6. You already see that the iPhone has more detail here in the ground. You can see the feathers of the bird just looks better. Overall, it's more detailed, but I will say it's actually kind of surprisingly comparable, considering that the Z Fold 6 is using digital and it doesn't have the best 3x telephoto camera anyways. Then this is another shot, and again, the iPhone is just more detailed, obviously. Z Fold 6 looks alright, but the iPhone just wins here. Okay, so now we get into the space where it's actually pretty comparable, and I don't think the iPhone is just destroying the Z Fold 6. And honestly, in some of the shots, you might even prefer the Z Fold 6's images because it's very, very, very comparable. The main differences you'll see is, like, for example, the Z Fold 6 has a very blue sky compared to the iPhone's a little bit washed out. And then the Z Fold 6 also is showing more, details on the wall and more depth of the color, the range of colors on the gray wall on the left side. And even though the building destruction in the background, the Z Fold 6 is showing more depth of the range of gray shades on that building. So overall, I think these are very comparable images. I don't think the iPhone beat the Z Fold 6 here. I actually think the Z Fold 6 produced the better image overall. The sky is a little bit too saturated, but I think the Z Fold 6 just wins here, in my opinion. But let me know what you think. And then moving on to the next image, you got a lot more things going on. And again, it's the same thing. If you look at the gray wall of the bridge, you can see just more detail and more range of colors in the Z Fold 6. Seems like the dynamic range is just better here for some reason. And then in terms of the sharpness and the detail, it's very similar across the board. This is an infinity focus scenario, right? So I feel like the Z Fold 6 is just holding it down in terms of the sharpness and overall quality of the image. And it's also kind of surprising when you consider the fact that the iPhone is shooting at 24 megapixels by default, whereas the Z Fold 6 is at 12 megapixels. But if you look at the bottom right, you see the bike and the little bike rack is more in focus and not blurred out, whereas on the Z Fold 6's image, yeah, that's something to note there. And then we got another image of City Hall, and you can see how it captured the person walking. And on the iPhone's image, there is a little bit of motion blur on his leg, whereas on the Z Fold 6's image, I feel like he's a little bit more sharp, but he's also closer, so maybe that's the difference. And then you can see the reflection. The Z Fold 6's image looks a little bit sharper when you look at the reflection on the buildings on the left. And then overall, just like I said, very comparable images. I feel like the Z Fold 6 is kind of aiming to create a more pleasing to the eye image right off the bat, whereas the iPhone, I feel like you have a little bit of wiggle room in terms of editing and stuff like that. That's what it seems like. But yeah, very, very, very comparable images, and there's not too much of a big difference in terms of quality and stuff. But obviously, if you zoom in, then the iPhone's images are going to be sharper because it has more megapixels, more information, and just a bigger sensor overall, so it's able to capture more detail. But like when you don't zoom in, when you're not pixel peeping, I think they're pretty comparable. And then here we have a 1x, we got some water, we got some sun glare and all that stuff. And the iPhone actually handled it pretty decently, whereas the Z Fold 6 is creating this pinkish hue where the sun is on the light beams. And you could say that the Z Fold 6 has a little more dynamic range because it's able to show the clouds a little bit more where the sun is. But at the same time, I feel like the iPhone's images is more balanced and it looks less washed out because of the light rays. So I think the iPhone definitely handled this one better. Maybe that's the new lens coating that Apple added or something like that. But the iPhone does have the lens flare at the bottom left. You can see that very, very heavily and strong. So there still are some lens flares. You can see some more of them in the building at the top left of the frame. So you still have the lens flares. But overall, I think the iPhone's image is a little bit more flattering. It's more detailed and more sharp. It's not as washed out. And then we got some ultra wide. So the iPhone 16 Pro Max has a new ultra wide camera this year. And to be honest, again, it's very comparable. Even with the new camera, I still think that the Z Fold 6 is holding its own. But you do have some, like I said, some pink and color stuff coming from the light beams of the sun on the Z Fold 6's image. However, it's still very comparable. The iPhone is going to look a little bit more sharper though, because it is a better camera overall. But yeah, let me know what you think. Then we got a photo of the clock tower with the main lens, and very comparable, very, very comparable. I feel like, again, it comes down to preference. And I'm not really seeing too many big differences other than the sky being really blue on the Z Fold 6's image. Then we got some more ultra wide, and yeah, it's literally just comparable. And I know people say like, oh, every camera can take good pictures in the daytime, and that's kind of true. But at the same time, I feel like there are certain cameras where I feel like I wouldn't feel necessarily comfortable taking a random picture even in daytime. Whereas with both these phones, I feel like I'm pretty comfortable. Like I can just snap a photo and be like, yeah, I know it's gonna be good in the daytime. So although every camera can take a decent photo in good lighting, I don't think it's necessarily the case 100% of the time. And also, just because it's daytime doesn't mean that it's ideal lighting conditions. Like I don't think this photo is the best lighting, especially when you talk about like the harsh light beams coming from, you know, the right side of the frame and you know, the shadowy areas of the shot and stuff like that. I don't think it's the most ideal lighting condition. So I wouldn't just say, oh, every phone could take a good picture in daytime, because it's not necessarily true in my opinion. Okay, so now we're trying out some close-ups of this flower, obviously. Both of these with the ultra-wide. The Z Fold 6 can't do macro shots with its ultra-wide camera. It doesn't have autofocus, things like that, so there's no macro mode. Whereas the iPhone 16 Pro Max can adjust its focus and do macro shots. So you're gonna see a little bit later on. But then this is 1x, trying to get as close as I can with the main camera lens. And you can see how far away you have to be with the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And I think this started with like the 14s, the 14 Pros. The minimum focus distance became very far away. And a lot of people were uncomfortable with that or not used to that, because with previous iPhones, you can get very close up without having to do macro mode. But with the 16 Pro Max, you have to be really far away in order to focus. The minimal focus distance is pretty far when you compare it to something like the Z Fold 6 with the smaller sensor size. And then this is 3x, so 3x digital on the iPhone and 3x optical on the Z Fold 6. And the bokeh is actually kind of decent when you consider the fact that these sensors are really small on the Z Fold 6. But obviously the iPhone's bokeh is going to look more natural, more like a camera with the little circles. The fall off is going to look a little bit more natural and realistic. However, I feel like the Z Fold 6 has the more detailed image. Like the iPhone's is definitely sharpened, but I feel like the Z Fold 6 has the better image in terms of details. Now I'm going to try to get as close as I can in high detail with both these cameras. You can see even right here, because this is ultra wide versus main camera, I think the Z Fold 6's main camera obviously just defeats the ultra wide of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. And then as we get closer, so this is 2x with the Z Fold 6, and it does have a little bit of a hazy effect. It's kind of strange, but the bokeh is kind of decent. The iPhone is allowing you to get a little bit closer and closer. This is at 2x. And then I go all the way up to 2.9x, because if you go to 3x, then it's going to switch lenses, which means that I'm going to have to step back to actually get this flower in focus. And then I'll have to zoom in further, which will lower the quality because it's going to be a worse digital zoom than what you have with the main sensor. So this is as far as you can go with the Z Fold 6 in terms of like a high quality, just point and shoot macro type shot. And then the iPhone, obviously I'm getting closer with the ultra wide lens because you can continuously get closer with that lens. And then as you can see, this is how close I got with the 16 Pro Max's ultra wide camera. It can just go very close. The detail is not that great, but yeah, maybe that's just a user error or something like that. I could have adjusted the sun slider and all that, but that's just a quick point and shoot of a macro shot with the 16 Pro Max and how close it can get in contrast to how far away the Z Fold 6 has to be for macro shots. And then we have a main shot of City Hall close up, and I know it's slanted, so allow me, but again, very comparable. I like the colors of the Z Fold 6 better, minus the overly saturated sky. It's just a little bit too oversaturated, but it's not like crazy. But overall, I like the colors of the Z Fold 6 better. The 16 Pro Max, definitely. It also produced a good image, but again, it's just very comparable. I think the inside walls of the building look a little bit better on the 16 Pro Max with a little more detail. But yeah, it's just very comparable. Okay, so now we're gonna go from a range of 1x all the way up to 30x on the Z Fold 6. So you got the CN Tower poking out. We're gonna focus on that as we zoom in. But 1x, very comparable as we've seen before. And now we're just gonna zoom in. Then you got 2x. I think both of them are doing a pretty good job here. It's not too crazy on either one. Not bad or not amazing. And then you got 3x digital on the iPhone. You see the iPhone falls apart here, whereas the Z Fold 6 is optical and it looks way sharper. It just looks like a better image to me. And then you get closer, 5x digital on the Z Fold 6, 5x optical on the iPhone. And I think the iPhone has more detail. However, I think the Z Fold 6 is actually holding its own here and it looks pretty good. But the iPhone is definitely going to be more detailed. And then we go to 10x. And again, I think the Z Fold 6 is actually doing a pretty good job. I think, honestly, I prefer the Z Fold 6's image over the iPhone's, even though the iPhone definitely has slightly more detail. But I think the way that the Z Fold 6 is coloring the image and the way that it's using like denoise and stuff like that, I think it just looks better to my eyes. But obviously the iPhone has more detail. And then we got 20x. And again, I think the Z Fold 6 is holding up pretty well compared to, you know, the 5x camera that the iPhone has, which in theory should be able to zoom further with high quality, but the iPhone is more detailed again. And then we get to the max that the iPhone can do, and that's 25x digital zoom, whereas the Z Fold 6 can go all the way to 30x. So just a little bit further than the iPhone, but honestly, it's pretty comparable in terms of distance because the iPhone has a further focal length anyways. And now we got some selfies. So the sky on the back of the Z Fold 6's image is very blown out. However, I think the Z Fold 6 has more detail in my face, and the iPhone's image on my face looks like very flat. It could just be the angle, but yeah, overall, I like the Z Fold 6's image better, to be honest. This is another selfie shot where you can zoom out on both of them. And honestly, in terms of detail, pretty comparable. I think the lighting and the colors are different, but I think it's just because of the angle of the different phones, because they're different shapes, right? So holding the phones in my hands is gonna be a different experience. Okay, so now we got another 1x shot, and this is going to be on the road with the reflection on the right side. And again, very comparable. Overall, if I have to say which one I like the best, I think I like the more contrasty approach of the Z Fold 6. I feel like it just fits my vibe a little bit more. But yeah, in terms of details, they're very close. And again, it just comes down to preference, in my opinion. Then we got another 1x shot. You can see the Z Fold 6 is pulling in a little more detail with the people in front. Like you can see the colors of their clothing a little bit more, and even the pink bottle is more saturated. The shadow on the ground is standing out a little bit more on the Z Fold 6 image. It's just a little bit more contrasty. And I think the details are pretty comparable. The iPhone's image definitely is higher quality for sure. It's not as saturated, so you might like that better. And I think again, it comes down to preference. Okay, so now we got a picture of an orange car in front of a purple building. And I think both of them are, you know, the iPhone is slightly too washed out. The Z Fold 6 is slightly too saturated. The actual look of the building in my eyes, I think was somewhere in between. And even the car, I think is somewhere in between. I think they're honestly pretty close. It's just the saturation, you know, the slider is a little bit up on one and a little bit down on the other. In terms of quality, again, very comparable. The iPhone is pulling in a little bit more detail in the background. If you look at the top right with the brown building and the red reflected light across it, I think the iPhone just has more detail in the bricks. You can see there, and the roof of the black building beside the purple building. There is a little bit of motion blur on one of the people walking in the back on the right side in the iPhone image versus the Z Fold 6 image has mostly everyone sharp. The person right above the orange car in the Z Fold 6 image does have a little bit of motion blur though. All right, so now we got a 1x. And you can see the difference in like the dynamic range and how they handle like highlights and lowlights. The Z Fold 6 definitely brightens the shadows. If you look at the right side with the people sitting down at that restaurant, the face is a little bit brighter on the Z Fold 6. And then also you can see the difference in the saturation, looking at the recycling bin on the bottom left. And the iPhone is handling the brightness of that window a little bit better than the Z Fold 6. But both of them have a lens flare. The iPhone's is not as opaque as the Z Fold 6's lens flare, but then at the same time, it's a bigger space. So I guess you pick and choose. The windows at the top of this building are a little bit darker on the Z Fold 6 image, which I think looks a little bit better, but the iPhone's is probably more realistic. And then we zoom in, so we got 3x optical with the Z Fold 6, 3x digital, the iPhone. And you can see that the iPhone is falling apart more than the Z Fold 6. I think the Z Fold 6 just looks more detailed, looks more together, and you can definitely work with it a little bit more compared to the iPhone's image with the digital zoom. And then we got 5x optical on the iPhone versus 5x digital on the Z Fold 6. And one thing I don't like about Samsung's cameras when they zoom in past the optical length is how they like smoothen things like way too much. I feel like it just kind of makes it look weird and hazy and stuff like that. There's too much smoothing. I feel like most of these smartphone brands do that when it comes to like zoom in very far, and I'm just not a fan of it. But yeah, the iPhone's image is clearly better here, just more sharper. It's not as smooth as the Z Fold 6's shot. I think it's just a better balanced image that you can work with more. All right, so now we got 10x, and you can see how the iPhone is holding together a lot better than the Z Fold 6 when it comes to lower light situation. And one thing that I've noticed with the Z Fold 6 is that when there's less light, the phone really struggles to like actually focus on the subject, especially in a darker situation. You're gonna see later on, it just can't focus at all. Like it takes the image of a blurry photo without focusing. Whereas the iPhone has it in focus, the text looks very sharp on the wall. You can see the detail of the bricks on the wall as well, where the paint is painted over. It just looks way better than the Z Fold 6. That was the main photo section. So now we're gonna move on to 4K 60 FPS video from both of them. Some of the shots are gonna be slowed down. And then also all the video clips are gonna be zoomed in. So the detail might look a little bit worse for both of them than it actually is in all the shots. Just letting you know that because it's zoomed in, I filmed in vertical, but I'm zooming in to fill up the frame of the video a little bit more. So that's just a little caveat. But yeah, let's get into this 4K 60 FPS from both of these phones. All right, so you have this shot here. I think the iPhone is definitely sharper. The iPhone is just gonna win in video for sure, but it should be interesting to see how the Z Fold 6 is holding up. And it's not doing bad so far. I think it's pretty comparable. This shot, you can definitely see the light flare a little bit more. And then this, me running to my daughter, holding both phones in my hand, handheld. And you can see the difference in the stabilization. The iPhone is definitely more stable when it comes to like, you know, quick movements and stuff. And then here's slow-mo of walking down the street. I think the Z Fold 6 has a more contrasty look that I like a little bit better than the iPhone's. I like how the dark parts of the image are dark like they should be, whereas the iPhone is kind of like balancing everything out. And I think it just comes down to preference. But obviously the iPhone is gonna have higher details, so you can do a little bit more when it comes to like editing and stuff like that. We got some flowers. And then this is testing the max zoom range. So the Z Fold 6 can actually zoom further than the iPhone in photography, but when it comes to videography, the Z Fold 6 maxes out at 12x, whereas the iPhone can go up to 15x. And it just has a higher quality anyways, because it's using the main camera to zoom that far. And then we got some selfie video. I think my face looks better on the Z Fold 6's image. And then some more clips of just walking around. And honestly, it's very comparable to my eyes. I don't think one is destroying the other. But again, for the fine details when it comes to the main cameras, the iPhone is definitely going to win. However, when it comes to selfie video, I think the Z Fold 6 actually destroys the iPhone without even using the main camera, because that's something you can do on the Z Fold 6 and foldable phones in general. But I think the selfie video just looks so much better on the Z Fold 6. I don't know what's happening with the selfie camera on the iPhone. And then we got some video of complete darkness in my house. I just want to show this for context for a couple of the photos coming on a little bit after this to show what kind of lighting situation I'm taking those photos in. And then of course, you know, we got some mochi donuts from Isabella's Mochi Donuts. This is probably the best mochi donut spot in Toronto. If you ever come here, you should definitely check out Isabella's. And yeah, so 1x. The detail is pretty similar. I think the iPhone's doing a better job here. But you can see the difference in the focus points. The iPhone is like more like a real camera where it focuses more in the middle and then kind of falls off at the top and the bottom, the foreground and the background. And then the Z Fold 6 is a little bit more focused all around the image. And then we get to 2x, slightly different now for both of them, but quality is pretty comparable in this lower lit situation. And then here's me holding one of the donuts that my daughter destroyed, and very comparable images. Again, I said that the whole video, but it's very true, to be honest. You can see the bokeh is a little bit stronger on the iPhone with the main camera lens. And my hand is a little bit darker on the Z Fold 6's image, but let me know what you think about these shots. And then we have some night mode shots. There is a light source on, but it's not a very bright light source. Like it's still dark and a little difficult for cameras. And I'm pretty sure the Z Fold 6 didn't use light mode in the shot, whereas the iPhone did. So it's obviously gonna be sharper and more clean. But I still kind of like the vibe of the Z Fold 6's image, but I think the iPhone just wins here. And then we got like all the lights are off except for the kitchen light. This is the lighting situation that I was showing in the video earlier. And also this is what I was talking about in terms of the Z Fold 6 struggling to focus when there's less light. It really just took a photo without trying to focus. Whereas the iPhone, it brightens up the image so that the phone can focus regardless of how dark it is. It tries its best to focus. And then we got Charizard. You can see the iPhone is actually more saturated in this shot, which is interesting. And I think the Z Fold 6 actually took the more balanced image in terms of the colors, the brightness of the image, the detail even. I know the angle is different, but yeah. The orange on the Z Fold 6's image is actually really accurate as well. And then we got the TARDIS, really dark situation, but then we got the light from the DS. And I think the Z Fold 6 actually took the better image here. Like it has more dynamic range. Whereas the iPhones, the left side of the TARDIS is kind of blown out with the blue light. The Z Fold 6 retains more detail and it just has better dynamic range. But like around it on the other side of the TARDIS, you can see that there's more noise and like a ripple effect happening on the Z Fold 6's image. So that's kind of strange. It is slightly different angles too. But let me know what you think about these shots. Then this is complete darkness in the room with my rabbit, and you know, she's digging into the hay and stuff, so there's obviously gonna be motion blur. And yeah, I just want to see how good these phones actually do, because people always say like, oh, you know, every phone does good in daytime and the better phones do better in lower lit situations. And for me, it's like, I think most phones can take a good night mode shot with like, you know, city lights, street lights and stuff like that. And those are the situations where people are taking pictures. Nobody's taking pictures in complete darkness like this. And as you can see, both phones did a really bad job. These are not good images at all. And, you know, I mean, a moving subject makes it a little bit worse, but you're not gonna get an amazing shot in super dark situations. And you're gonna see that here. This is Kusu looking at me, and again, she's not moving as much, but still very bad images from both of them. The iPhone is pulling in a little bit more light and detail though. And then you got the optical zoom levels for both of them. This photo is taken from my window and it has the street lights outside, so it's not completely dark. But again, you can see how both of them are kind of struggling. The Z Fold 6 obviously is struggling more because it's a smaller sensor than the iPhone. Then you got 10x zoom, and you can see that the iPhone is benefiting from having a bigger sensor because there's more separation between the subject and the sidewalk, the background. Whereas with the Z Fold 6's image, it's kind of like all one thing. It's like water paint. It's not that good. But yeah, that's basically it. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Which one you think did better? Which one did you like more in terms of like the style, the colors and stuff like that? Obviously the iPhone is going to have more detailed shots because it is a better camera system overall in terms of the sensor size, the upgraded ultra wide camera, further zoom lens, things like that. It's going to have better shots in most scenarios. But which one did you like stylistically wise? Which one did you prefer? And also, do you think the Z Fold 6 did a good job, considering the fact that people say it has a very trash camera system, or that they say it's, you know, it's an expensive phone, so it should have a better camera system, or it should have Samsung's best cameras and all that stuff? Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for the next video because we got a lot more videos on the Z Fold 6 and the iPhone 16 Pro Max coming very soon, and even more camera comparisons. So yeah, until next video, we are out. Peace.